In the golden, fading light of a late 1970s afternoon, the Arizona desert exhaled a heat that shimmered over the vast horizon of the 26-bar ranch. For the world, this was the home of a cinematic god, a man whose face was etched into the very granite of American culture. But inside the thick, cool walls of the ranch house, away from the prying eyes of fans and the relentless flash of paparazzi cameras, a different kind of legend was being written. John Wayne, the man the world called the Duke, was not sitting in a director's chair or rehearsing lines for another blockbuster western. Instead, he was standing in the absolute silence of his private study, his large, weathered hands gently tracing the intricate beadwork of a 19th century Cheyenne war vest. This was the sanctuary of the collector, a hidden world where the celluloid hero gave way to a sophisticated guardian of history. Most people assumed that Wayne's connection to the West ended when the director shouted "cut," but for the Duke, the movies were just the beginning of a lifelong obsession with the soul of the American frontier. The collection he built over decades was not a hobby. It was a profound, multi-million-dollar testament to a vanishing world. It was a secret empire of canvas, bronze, and clay that represented the true heart of the man behind the myth. While Hollywood was busy turning the West into a simplified playground of good versus evil, John Wayne was spending his private fortune to preserve its complex and often brutal reality. He understood, perhaps better than anyone, that the grit he portrayed on screen was rooted in something much deeper, a heritage of resilience that was being lost to the relentless march of modernization. His ranch wasn't just a place to raise cattle. It was a living museum, a fortress of tradition where the artifacts of the past were treated with more reverence than the Oscars on his mantle. Every painting on the wall and every sculpture on the pedestal was a silent witness to the journey of a nation, and Wayne felt a heavy, personal responsibility to ensure those voices were never silenced by the passage of time. As we peel back the layers of this extraordinary 20th episode, we discover a man of immense intellectual depth and artistic sensitivity. Wayne wasn't just buying Western stuff to look the part. He was a scholarly hunter of authenticity. He spent his nights reading the journals of pioneers and his days studying the brushstrokes of masters like Frederic Remington and Charles Russell. He could discuss the specific tension in a horse's muscles as depicted in a bronze casting with the same intensity he brought to a film set. For him, art was a way to ground his soul. The fame was a whirlwind that often threatened to pull him away from his roots, but these artifacts, these tangible pieces of history, were his anchors. They reminded him of who he was and where he came from. In the quiet corridors of his Arizona ranch, surrounded by the scent of old leather, expensive oil paint, and desert dust, John Wayne found the peace that the bright lights of Los Angeles could never provide. To truly understand the Duke's passion, one must look at his deep and often private relationship with the Native American tribes of the Southwest. Long before it was fashionable in Hollywood to speak of cultural preservation, John Wayne was walking the dusty mesas of the Hopi and Navajo reservations, not as a movie star seeking a photo op, but as a student of an ancient heritage. He was fascinated by the spiritual weight of the Kachina dolls, those intricately carved figures that represented the spirits of the earth and sky. He didn't just see them as curiosities. He saw them as sacred vessels of a people's faith. He would sit for hours on the sun-baked porches of tribal artisans, listening to the stories of their ancestors and the meanings behind the patterns woven into their rugs. He used his immense wealth to support these artists, often paying far above the market value to ensure that their traditions could survive in a world that was increasingly indifferent to them. This was the Duke's silent rebellion, a man of the establishment using his power to shield a culture that the very history he celebrated had often sought to erase. His scouting trips for these treasures became legendary among the small circle of high-end art dealers and trading post owners who knew him. Wayne would often disappear for days into the backroads of New Mexico, driving his own truck through washes and over rocky trails to reach a remote outpost where a rare piece of pottery was rumored to be held. He had an incredible eye for the genuine, able to spot the difference between a mass-produced tourist trinket and a piece of clay that held the fingerprint of a master from a century ago. To Wayne, the flaws in a handmade object were where the beauty lived. They were the marks of human struggle and triumph. This relentless pursuit of the authentic was his way of honoring the real West. He felt a kinship with the rugged individualists who created these works, men and women who worked with their hands and lived by their wits, much like the characters he portrayed on the silver screen. In his mind, there was no separation between the art he collected and the life he lived. They were both part of the same grand, unfolding American story. One of the most remarkable aspects of the collection was the library of frontier journals and personal letters Wayne amassed. While others collected gold or stocks, the Duke collected the private thoughts of the men and women who crossed the plains in covered wagons. He spent countless late nights in his study, the smoke from his cigar curling around the lamp as he read the faded ink of a rancher's wife from 1870. He found a strange comfort in their hardships, seeing their resilience as a blueprint for his own life. When he was battling the big sea or facing the pressures of a changing film industry, he would turn to these voices from the past for strength. He realized that his own legacy was just a single chapter in a much larger book. This humility was the secret ingredient of his character, a trait that was reinforced every time he looked at the artifacts surrounding him. He was a man of steel, yes, but he was a man of steel who understood that even the strongest metal is forged in the fire of those who came before. The 26-bar ranch was more than a home. It was his laboratory of the human spirit, where he refined his own values through the lens of history. As the shadows of his life began to grow longer in the late 1970s, the Duke's focus shifted from acquisition to preservation. He knew that the clock was ticking, and he became obsessed with the fate of his secret empire. He didn't want his collection to be sold off piece by piece at a flashy Beverly Hills auction. He wanted it to remain a cohesive story that future generations could learn from. He began the meticulous process of documenting the provenance of every painting and every artifact, often recording his own voice on tape to explain why a particular piece of art moved him. He spoke of the honest light in a painting of a desert storm, noting how the artist had captured the exact moment of tension before the rain hits the parched earth. This wasn't just the talk of a wealthy man protecting an investment. It was the final testament of a man who had fallen in love with the land and wanted to share that love with the world long after he was gone. The logistical effort to protect these treasures in the harsh Arizona climate was nothing short of heroic. Wayne invested a fortune in turning a wing of the ranch into a state-of-the-art, climate-controlled vault. He fought a constant battle against the desert dust and the fluctuating temperatures that threatened to crack the delicate oil canvases and fade the ancient textiles. He saw himself as a sentry, a man standing guard at the gates of history. Even when his physical strength began to fail him, he would still make his nightly rounds, walking through the gallery with a flashlight, checking on the silent faces in the portraits and the bronze riders on his shelves. It was as if he was saying goodnight to old friends. These pieces had given him so much peace, inspiration, and a sense of identity, and he owed them his protection until his very last breath. This was the final, most private performance of John Wayne's life, the lonely guardian of a vanishing frontier, standing tall against the darkness. When the end finally came in June of 1979, the world mourned the loss of a movie star, but a few museums in the West knew they were losing something much more, a visionary patron. Following his wishes, a massive portion of his personal collection was gifted to the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City. It was his final action scene, a grand gesture that ensured the Duke's vision of the West would remain accessible to every child who ever dreamed of being a cowboy. Today, when you walk through the halls of that museum, you aren't just looking at art. You are looking through the eyes of John Wayne himself. You see the grit he admired, the spirituality he respected, and the history he cherished. In the end, the collector was the role that allowed him to be his most honest self. He left behind the flickering images on the screen, but he also left a tangible legacy of beauty and honor that continues to inspire. The dust has long since settled on the 26-bar ranch, but through the art he gathered, the spirit of the Duke remains as eternal and as unyielding as the Arizona sun rising over the mesas he loved so dearly.